In 1977, ABC doubled down on a kind of television the other networks wouldn't touch. Bold, suggestive, and unapologetically fun. Three's Company was raunchy, ridiculous, and revolutionary. A sitcom critics called immoral, audiences couldn't stop watching, and church groups tried to cancel. It turned three unknown actors into household names. But behind the laugh track was a storm of contract disputes, moral panic, and one feud that tore the show apart. This is the untold story of Three's Company. Before it ever hit American airwaves, the idea began overseas. Three's Company was adapted from the British sitcom Man About the House. Its premise was daring for its time. Two single women take in a male roommate they find passed out in their bathtub. To keep their conservative landlord at bay, they pretend he's gay. Producer Donald L. Taftner, with Ted Bergman, bought the rights to Man About the House and pitched the idea to all three major networks in 1975. CBS and NBC weren't having it. The idea of an unmarried man living with two women, even under the guise of being gay, was considered too risky for prime time. But ABC was in a different mood. Under new programming chief Fred Silverman, the network was starting to build a reputation for embracing shows with sex appeal and controversy. Charlie's Angels was already being derided by critics as jiggle television, but audiences tuned in anyway. Silverman saw the same potential in Three's Company. Brash, flashy, and willing to go where the other networks wouldn't. It took 3 pilots before ABC finally signed off. The first cast featured Valerie Curtin and Suzanne Zenner as the roommates, with John Ritter already in the male lead, then named David Bell. By the third pilot in January 1977, Joyce DeWitt and Suzanne Summers completed the trio we know. Along the way, the producers made a key change. The man wouldn't be a jazz musician, but an aspiring chef. That small tweak grounded the setup and made it more relatable, and it opened the door for the perfect actor to bring it to life. Enter John Ritter, the son of country singer Tex Ritter. He had an effortless charm, a vulnerability that made audiences root for him, and a gift for physical comedy that turned simple clumsiness into art. He could tumble over a couch, pop up with a double take, and make it look like pure instinct. Ritter wasn't just funny, he was magnetic.
That's a lot of shelves.
But even then, his place wasn't guaranteed. After the third pilot, ABC ran the show through a marketing survey. While audiences liked the concept, some complained Jack Tripper wasn't manly enough. ABC executive briefly considered recasting Ritter with a more traditional, macho lead, but thankfully, the idea died quickly. Keeping Ritter was a decision that gave Three's Company its heart. Suzanne Summers landed the role of Chrissy Snow, the sweet-natured roommate with a dizzy innocence. She played wide-eyed naivete with a breathy delivery that made every line funnier than it looked on paper. Fred Silverman had seen Suzanne on The Tonight Show and personally pushed for her casting. That last-minute decision made the third pilot click, and convinced ABC to finally greenlight the show. Summers wasn't just comic relief. She gave the show its sex appeal and quickly became its breakout star.
When a guy said he's ready for dessert and he really means the chocolate mousse, it's time to say goodbye.
Then there was Joyce DeWitt as Janet Wood, the sensible roommate who kept the household tethered to reality. A trained stage actress, DeWitt's sharp timing and exasperated expressions balanced Ritter's chaos and Summers' sparkle.
I'm sorry. Hey, but this is not the end of the world. You can take that test again next year.
Three's Company premiered as a mid-season replacement on March 15, 1977, and audiences loved it from the start. By that fall, ABC moved it into the prize Tuesday lineup alongside Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, a slot that instantly made it a top 10 powerhouse. Critics were divided, but viewers tuned in week after week, drawn to the pratfalls, misunderstandings, and naughty innuendo that became the show's signature. On screen, the chemistry was flawless. You believed they were friends, navigating the awkwardness of single life together. But that perfect balance came with an expiration date. Behind the laughter, resentment and power struggles were already brewing, tensions that would eventually blow the trio apart. And it wasn't just the roommates who made Three's Company click. The supporting cast became just as essential to the show's identity. Stanley and Helen Roper, the uptight landlord and his long-suffering wife, were fan favorites from the start. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley played them to perfection. Stanley is all grumpy suspicion, Helen all frustrated sass. Stanley's signature glare into the camera after a zinger never got old. The move was Norman Fell's own invention, his way of letting the audience in on the joke and breaking the fourth wall without saying a word.
Ellen, this is pure stuff. I mean, everything that touches this beer has been sterilized.
So that's your problem.
Their popularity was so clear that ABC spun them off into their own series, The Ropers, after season 3. The official story was that ABC wanted to cash in on the Ropers' popularity, and at first, it worked. The spin-off premiered in spring 1979 with a huge debut, pulling in a 55% audience share and landing in the top 10. But Norman Fell was reluctant to leave Three's Company at all. He'd found his groove and feared walking away from a hit. According to Fell, ABC promised that if the Ropers failed within a year, he and Audrey Lindley could return. Encouraged by Lindley, he took the leap. Unfortunately, the success didn't last. A time slot shift to Saturday nights tanked the ratings, and the show limped through 2 short seasons before being canceled. Fell later claimed ABC broke his promise to bring them back, something the network denied, and he never hid his regret for leaving the show that made him a star. Their exit left a big hole in the show. The constant suspicion and bickering that fueled so many storylines had vanished overnight. To fill that gap, the producers brought in TV legend Don Knotts. Enter Ralph Furley. With his loud outfits, nervous energy, and exaggerated reactions, Mr. Furley was an instant classic. Knotts gave Three's Company a second wind of comic relief, even if he was a very different flavor than the Ropers.
Oh, Mr. Furley, you're being a little paranoid. Paranoid? Was I paranoid when Bart tapped my phone? Was I paranoid when he opened my mail before I got it? Was I paranoid when he had a detective follow me?
And then there was Larry Dallas, Jack's scheming best friend and upstairs neighbor, played by Richard Klein. He was only supposed to appear once, but his chemistry with Ritter was so strong that producers kept writing him back in. Larry became a fixture at the Regal Beagle, adding comic relief and keeping Jack tangled up in harebrained schemes.
Oh, yeah. You just stick to that story. I'm sure any jury in the world will believe you.
These side characters helped keep the show fresh, adding new energy just as the original trio's chemistry was starting to show cracks. But even before tension flared behind the scenes, Three's Company was already stirring controversy in living rooms across America. Religious groups and conservative watchdogs blasted the premise as immoral. A man sharing an apartment with 2 single women was scandalous enough, but pretending to be gay pushed it over the line. Some church leaders even called for boycotts, arguing the show was corrupting the nation's values. ABC suddenly found itself in a bind. The network was already riding high in the ratings, but Three's Company was different. Riskier, brasher, the kind of show critics scorned, but audiences devoured. To calm the backlash, executives often forced writers to insert dialogue clarifying that Jack wasn't really gay and that the roommates were just friends. It became a constant tug-of-war. The creative team wanted to push boundaries, while ABC wanted to avoid picket lines. Behind the scenes, those battles over what was acceptable were constant. ABC's broadcast standards department often demanded rewrites over words like bed, naked, and sleeping together. Scripts were routinely sent back with notes warning against anything that even hinted at sexual suggestion. Writers joked that it sometimes took more effort to satisfy the censors than to land the laughs.
My God. What have you done with Helen?
Mr. Roper,
What are you doing here?
this is my bed.
That tension, edgy comedy fighting against cautious censors, became baked into the show's DNA. And for a while, it worked. Three's Company managed to be both a ratings juggernaut and a cultural lightning rod at the same time. But the pressure wasn't only coming from outside. The first cracks in the trio began to form in early 1978, when Newsweek ran a cover story on the show. Suzanne Summers posed separately in a revealing nightie, and that photo was later superimposed over the group shot of her, John Ritter, and Joyce DeWitt. Ritter and DeWitt felt blindsided. It looked like Summers was being elevated above them. DeWitt especially came away bitter, later saying she felt misled by how the publicity was handled. That cover deepened the tension, planting the idea that Summers was a star while the others were just supporting players. By 1980, Suzanne Summers wasn't just playing Chrissy Snow. She was the show's breakout star. Her innocent sex appeal, breath of delivery, and timing made her a household name. But off camera, Summers felt her paycheck didn't reflect her value. John Ritter was earning about $150,000 per episode, while Suzanne Summers and Joyce DeWitt were each making around $35,000. With her husband Alan Hamill now acting as her manager, Summers pushed for a massive raise. She wanted to match Ritter's salary at $150,000 an episode.
Mistake.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself.
I was afraid of that.
Producer Ted Bergman flatly rejected the demand, saying it would trigger raises across the cast. DeWitt had a favored nations clause, and Ritter would expect more too. We'd be spending $500,000 before writing a single script, Bergman said. It was crazy. Hamill stormed out of the meeting. When rehearsals resumed weeks later, Summers showed up on day one, but the morning of the taping, she called in sick. Her excuse? She'd injured herself dancing on The Tonight Show. The producers wanted to send their doctor to verify, but Summers refused the exam. That disqualified the production from insurance coverage, and the taping was canceled. Summers skipped the next few episodes. Eventually, she returned. But the producers, worried about being held hostage, rewrote her role. Chrissy was sent home to care for her sick mother and appeared only in short phone call scenes at the end of each episode. These were taped separately the day before the rest of the cast shot their scenes. Summers never returned to the set. The once perfect trio was shattered. Ritter felt blindsided, seeing Summers' demands as a betrayal that threatened the entire show, and he all but refused to work with her. DeWitt was caught in the middle, trying to keep production afloat while the tabloids feasted on the drama. The three co-stars who had once sold the fantasy of friendship couldn't even stand to be in the same room. Summers was eventually written out entirely, replaced first by Jenna Lee Harrison as Chrissy's cousin Cindy, and later by Priscilla Barnes as Nurse Terry Alden. Cindy was sweet and clumsy, clearly designed to echo Chrissy's wide-eyed energy, but fans saw it as a stopgap, and she was gone after 2 seasons. Barnes brought more bite and brains, but for many viewers, the original magic had already walked out the door with Chrissy Snow. Behind the scenes, the personal rift was just as deep. Ritter and Summers barely spoke for decades, only reconciling shortly before his death in 2003. By this point, even Ritter was feeling the strain. Years of carrying the show's physical comedy had started to wear him down. The misunderstandings, the double entendres, it all began to feel like the same story on repeat. He wanted to stretch, to find new layers in Jack Tripper, but the formula never changed. Crew members later said you could see the fatigue setting in. Ritter still gave it everything on camera, but off camera, the fun was fading. Even with the turmoil, Three's Company held its place as the ratings juggernaut, never dropping out of the top 10 until its final season. At its peak, it climbed as high as number 2 in the nation, proof that audiences still loved Jack Tripper's antics even as the cast around him shifted. By its 8th season in 1984, the formula had worn thin. Viewers were shifting to glossy primetime soaps like Dynasty and Falcon Crest, and Three's Company suddenly plunged to 33rd place. After years near the top of the ratings, ABC pulled the plug after 172 episodes. But for most of its run, the show had been unstoppable. A ratings powerhouse, a cultural lightning rod, and proof that controversy didn't kill television, it sold it. John Ritter's pratfalls and timing made him one of the most gifted physical comedians the medium ever produced, and the show's best years still stand among the funniest sitcom episodes of the era. And even cancellation didn't end it. And syndication, Three's Company kept finding new audiences, introducing generation after generation to Jack, Chrissy, and Janet's misadventures. The pratfalls still land, but the real legacy is a drama behind the comedy. Contract wars, shattered friendships, and risks no other network dared to take. Decades later, people aren't just laughing at the jokes. They're still talking about the chaos that made them possible.